When the Muslim Arabs arrived in Iberia in 711, the Jews put themselves at their service. A different master, you might think. The Arabs were few in number and sought loyal allies. The Jews have never been too enthusiastic about national service and the military. The two Semitic communities found it in their interests to get along, especially since many Jews were from the Maghreb, the other side of the Mediterranean anyway. And even more of them came to reinforce the presence of the Moors and the Jews of Sepharad. Even Arab geographers point out that Granada, Tarragona and Lucena were Jewish cities to mark the importance of this minority. The development of urban life required merchants and administrators, functions that the Arabs and Berbers were reluctant to perform. Today, the Emirates and Qatar have a very similar outlook. Europe and the continent of India provides the workers that enable the leisurely life of luxury. In the 1100s, Andalusian Roman was supplanted by Arabic as the majority language, and adopting the Muslim way of life as far as name, clothing, food. These are the Mozarabs. This was the fate of the conquered Christians. Bishops translated the Psalms into Arabic. Then the Bible, then canon law. Still mostly Roman law. Latin was still the liturgical language of the church. Secular written text was sort of half and half. Arabized Christians were used by the Caliphate for diplomatic missions with regard to the Christian West. Reception, translation of those ambassadors. Exactly the same for the Jews into Christian Jewish connections and Arab Jewish connections. Vizier to the King of Granada was not a bad title for a Jewish guy. He became warlord for Granada against Seville, after managing the Caliphate's diplomatic relations for a fair while. For everyone, culturally, knowing Arabic gave access to ancient knowledge through Muslim scholars and the immense library that Cordoba had. Cordoba's influence emanated throughout the Iberian Peninsula, including Portugal. 400,000 vellum books in their library. The writings of Muslim scholars included the Indian numbering system that we've all got today. The texts of Aristotle and Plato were there transmitted to the West from Cordoba, and in the 12th century from Toledo and its translations from the Mozarabs. Greek translated from Arabic into Christian cultures. Sephardic Jewish culture flourished in this environment. The secular knowledge was absorbed: philosophy, science, poetry. It was illustrated by a solemn Gabirol, author of Neoplatonic treatise. Seville, Cordoba, Granada, Toledo and Zaragoza were home to the most flourishing Jewish communities, as was the coast of Portugal, but that was under Celtic influence as well. Maritime was the superhighway of the day. The inlands were almost mountainous and full of superstition, pagan bandits and what you would consider nigh on Stone Age people who had hardly crawled out of their stone dolmens. The numerical importance of minority groups gives them the obligatory tolerance, rather than the elite fooling themselves of their benevolence toward the minority. Averroes, who died around the year 1200, is still considered one of the greatest thinkers of Islam from the Al-Andalus period. He came from fairly humble beginnings, born into a family of jurists. In Cordoba he was a Cadi and a doctor, became a learned commentator on the works of Aristotle, which he made known in all its breadth to Westerners, but died, disgraced, at the hands of the Almohads, having lived at the crossroads of two periods. Much of the transfer of knowledge from the Muslim world to the Latin world took place through the translation of Arabic from the medieval period onwards, notably through the School of Toledo and the Jewish translators of Arabic. Archaeological and historical research on Al-Andalus has shown the importance of the Arab cultural heritage in the development of European civilization. Andalusia during the Golden Age was a period of special growth for poetry. since it seemed to be rooted in the highly mundane concerns of man, in mainly the Jewish man. Love poetry was also taken a prominent place. Perfectly bilingual, Arabic and Hebrew, and assimilated into the Arab-Islamic environment, the Jewish poets of the period, by their impetus and by their brand new form of their poetic creation, raised the following question. At what level does Hebraic love poetry in the Andalusian Golden Age find its roots in Andalusian life itself, and what level do these roots go back beyond this period to the biblical Hebraic text? We're talking about surviving recorded history versus prehistoric. Recorded history is written down from what happens in life, and life has been happening for tens of thousands of years before that. What is written down would be so much different to the confrontations with the Neanderthals and the interbreeding. The First Testament of the Bible is likely to include many of the concerns of Neanderthal people. The Andalusian Golden Age obviously had Arabic love poetry. Why was Hebrew love poetry suddenly in the ascendant in the revival of its origins in Arabic and Jewish culture? For the Jews of the Middle Ages in Spain, Arabic was the key to an entirely new way of thinking. There were two Jews that abandoned the Aramaic for the new language, but Arabic functioned both as the language of high culture and the common tongue of both Jews and Arabs in everyday exchange. It was the same time linguistically akin to Aramaic and Hebrew, with morphological forms and cognates that facilitated transcribing Arabic into Hebrew letters, and reading it, the form of Arabic we now call Judeo-Arabic. Assimilating Arabic was even less of a leap for the indigenous Aramaic-speaking Jews of the Middle East than it was for the Jewish immigrants to Europe, making the transition from Aramaic to European vernaculars. Every town and village in Europe spoke a transitional, different vernacular from one end of what is now a country to the other. Not just an accent. The language of the Islamic faith was less repugnant and less threatening to the Jews than the language and the doctrine of the Christian Church. It's estimated the first Jewish communities arrived in Iberia around the year 70 after the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem. They arrived in Portugal in small numbers. Toledo, Segovia and Seville were the largest communities in Iberia. The Jews were more or less tolerated under the Romans and the Visigoths, who set up the Toledo councils. The Jews welcomed the Arab conquerors at the beginning of the 8th century, like brothers or cousins. During the 3 centuries that followed, until the fall of the Taifa kings, around the time Britain was invaded by William the Conqueror, the Jews on the Iberian Peninsula had reached a high economic and social position, such a level that all agree it was the golden age of Judaism in Spain and Iberia, Portugal. The Jewish communities of Al-Andalus, the territory of the Iberian Peninsula, under Muslim rule, were particularly distinguished between the reign of the Umayyad Caliph of Cordoba and the Almohad takeover of power. That's between 900 and 1140. No other medieval Jewish communities had so many high-ranking personalities in the political and economic sphere. No other produced a literary culture of such scope, revealing an intellectual life shared with the Muslims. This flowering is all the more unexpected since the Jews of Hispania, Iberia, had lived in great social and legal uncertainty during the Visigoth period, when they had been persecuted and subjected to decrees of compulsory conversion. A part of the Jewish population of Al-Andalus, undoubtedly from the migratory waves of the Islamic conquests, embraced from the beginning the culture and language of the invaders. The unification of the territories and the adoption of the Arabic language constituted a fundamental change, as it facilitated, among other things, the establishment of fluid relations between the Jewish communities themselves. In this process of Arabization, the peculiarity of Jewish literary culture is the extraordinary cultural vitality of the elites, combined with their material prosperity, their participation in public affairs and in the administration of the courts of Al-Andalus, their responsibilities within their communities and their importance in Jewish history, which is a paradox given the small number of their representatives. Averroes was an Arab scholar in the late Golden Age period. His Neoplatonist philosophies held an extraordinary attraction in the minds of people as far afield as Paris. Maimonides, as a Jewish theologian, philosopher and physician, was his contemporary. They both fell foul of the Almohads, those damn Christians. Maimonides was forced to become Muslim, exiled to Morocco with his family, and then went to Egypt, where he returned to Judaism. He had been accused of apostasy, and his life was only saved through the intervention of one of his powerful friends. Two examples of freedom of thought and co-fraternity of communities in Al-Andalus. Epistle to Yemen, setting out the Jewish philosopher's outlook on Christians and Muslims, as he was free to do. Covetousness within a power vacuum. Maghrebi conquerors, the Almohads particularly, pursued a very harsh policy towards Christians and Jews. The Christian Reconquista, progress, and then victory. That 7th century march from the mountains of the north, which patiently won over the whole territory and made Spain a Catholic land once more and for all. The Jews had to pay for their Spanish Golden Age under the Muslims. The Jews had been a bridge between the Muslim and Christian society, developing an original culture. This cultural advance explains the part taken by the Jews in activities such as medicine and trade, especially that of money. Yesterday they were bankers to the caliphs and Muslim kings, and today they are financiers and tax collectors to Catholic kings. Their ostentatious power makes them unpopular, which extends to the whole Jewish community. That timeless story of the excesses of a few impacting the many, who are made to pay for them. The excesses of Hollywood and the excesses of ultra-Zionist Israel, Palestine, is what we have today. In the Golden Age, it was Sephardic Judaism. 12th century, Granada, Cordoba, Lucena, Merida, Zaragoza and Seville. The Jewish Golden Age. At the beginning of the Muslim conquest, the Jews avoided political office. Their Arabization allowed them to integrate into Muslim society and to change this situation thanks to the most talented among them. They were Jewish doctors, merchants or farmers. 2 centuries later, in the 10th century, they were advisors to Muslim princes, and some of them were even warlords, like Samuel de Magella. But in these modern times, Jewish military servicemen are relatively few in number in any of the diaspora countries, as a percentage of the population as a whole. The revival of medieval Jewish poetry in Arabic came from this one man, Samuel Magrela, who is one of the greatest Rishonim. He wrote an encyclopedia of Hebrew grammar in 12 volumes, and was the Granada community representative, but it was also a vizier. As vizier, he was prime minister and chief of the armies of Al-Andalus. He rode horses, commanded Muslims, and fought wars, which was forbidden to a Dahimi. He wrote poetry on the battlefield. Probably not Siegfried Sassoon-like. He translated Jewish poetry from Hebrew and built the Alhambra of Granada. His son wasn't so clever and got accused of plotting to assassinate the Sultan and was crucified in 1066, along with 1,500 families and 4,000 Jews exterminated on one day in the Granada massacre. The almost contemporary account goes, on Sunday, December the 30th, 1066, a Muslim group, outraged with the Jewish people, decided to incite a riot in Granada. As they stormed the royal palace, they were targeting one man. His name was Joseph Nagrella, son of the famous Samuel, the Jewish vizier, and the Berber king Badis al-Muzahar of Granada. So enraged were the common Muslims of Granada because a Jew was able to create a vertical alliance within what was thought of as a primary Muslim-dominated area, because a political poem was written by Abu Ishaq calling for killing of the Jews. This in turn organised a group of Muslims that did indeed start the mass murder. Because of this, it's recorded that nearly 4,000 people fell to their deaths that day. Ishaq's poem played a very important role in the Granada massacre of 1066. It expressed his frustrations with the Jewish people, thus creating a kind of poetic propaganda. At that time, poetry was used for more than the current definition of poetry, tending towards artistic or romantic. Far from it. Some poems dealt with life, death, and other themes that seem to be reoccurring in modern poetry, but poetry was also used as a political statement and a political weapon. Poetry was known as the supreme ornament of Arab culture. It was the ostentatiousness in his power as a vizier, Jewish vizier, that they objected to, the ostentatiousness. Do not consider it a breach of faith to kill them. A breach of faith would be to let them carry on. They have violated our covenant with them. So how can you be held guilty against the violators? How can they have any pact when we are obscure and they are prominent? Now we are humble beside them, as if we were wrong and they were right. A massacre such as Granada in 1066 are a rare occurrence in Islamic history, the whole of Islamic history, with these clearly being calls to arms against the vizier and the Jews of Granada. It has been directly linked to the riot that ensued and killing so many innocent Jewish people on that day. A Christian writer writes that this Golden Age period is only a short interlude in a bitter history marked by wars, displacements and extortion, an interlude essentially internal to the Jewish community, which gave the best of its intellectual and spiritual expression. This was achieved not because of the idyllic conditions of existence in the shadow of the crescent, but in spite of the inferior and precarious situation that remained its lot. High figures of this period got there through navigating between the Christian and the Arab kingdoms. The Jews became grammar experts, lexicographers, poets and philosophers in a renaissance of Hebrew and poetry in the Arabic language that has not been equalled since. The middle of the 13th century sounded the death knell of peace for the Jews. In 1263, Maimonides fell into the trap of the Barcelona dispute with Father Pablo Cristiano, a Jewish convert to Christianity. The following year he went into the exile in the Holy Land.